The diner's air was thick with the smell of frying onions and stale coffee, mingling with the faint, dusty Arizona heat seeping through the cracked windows. Khalid Al-Rashid sat in his usual corner booth at Sagebrush Corner, the worn leather groaning under his weight. He took a slow sip of the mint tea that had become his ritual every Friday, its soothing aroma a fragile tether to the quiet moments he so rarely allowed himself. Outside, a haze of dust swirled across the parking lot, shimmering in the scorching afternoon sun, but inside, for once, there was calm. Then it happened. A sudden, violent cough tore through his chest. The mug of tea wobbled in his hand, tilted and crashed onto the table, splintering into jagged fragments that scattered across the cracked vinyl surface. Khalid's face drained of color, then deepened to an alarming shade of purple. His eyes bulged. He clawed at his throat, his breath shallow and desperate. Panic ignited in the diner like gasoline. Chairs scraped across the floor, coffee cups rattled. A baby began to wail in the corner. "Somebody help!" a man shouted, rising from his booth. A doctor at a nearby table, drawn by instinct, leapt forward. Hands on Khalid's shoulders, he tried the Heimlich maneuver with the authority of years of medical training. But Khalid only coughed once more, his eyes widening in terror. Time stretched. Each second was a drumbeat of dread. His chest heaved, his body trembled as though the very air around him had conspired to vanish. Patrons froze, helpless. Some turned away, unable to watch. Others whispered prayers under their breath. Layla Hassan, carrying a tray of breakfast plates she had just cleared, froze mid-step. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She knew that sound. She had heard it in her grandmother's stories of the desert, the choking traveler, alone and panicked, clinging to life by a thread. Her breath caught. Memories surged, vivid as the desert sun, years of lessons from her grandmother about the Saifa release, an ancient Bedouin technique designed for moments exactly like this. Instinct overrode fear. She dropped the tray, plates clattered to the floor. "Move, please," she said, her voice calm yet urgent as she gently pressed the doctor aside. "Let me try." Khalid's panicked gaze met hers, his pupils wide, searching. He had never met her beyond polite greetings. The world had narrowed to a single moment, a single person, Layla. She positioned her hands, palms firm against his abdomen, the other stabilizing his chest. Every motion had to be precise. A lift, a compression, upward and steady, just as her grandmother had instructed in the sweltering desert nights. The diner seemed to hold its breath, the clatter of dishes and chatter muted in the shadow of impending tragedy. And then a fragment of leaf, soaked and trembling, shot from Khalid's mouth. Air rushed into his lungs. His chest expanded in a shuddering gasp. Tears pricked his eyes. He coughed again, weaker this time, until he could breathe without fighting. The color returned to his face, first a ghostly pink, then the warm flush of life. A stunned silence followed, broken only by the drip of tea from the broken mug and the soft whimper of relief from a nearby child. Then, almost suddenly, the diner erupted. Applause, cheers, even tears, as if the room had collectively exhaled after holding its breath for an eternity. The doctor stepped back, wide-eyed, disbelief etched into every line of his face. Khalid, still trembling, reached out. His hand shook as it hovered above Layla. "You saved my life," he whispered, voice thick with awe and lingering fear. His eyes searched hers, trying to comprehend not just the action but the courage, the calm, the ancient wisdom that had cut through panic like a blade. Layla exhaled slowly, trying to steady her racing heart. She smiled gently. "It was the Saifa," she murmured. "A Bedouin technique my grandmother taught me." The moment hung in the air, raw, unfiltered, and profoundly human. Khalid realized in the most visceral way possible that life's true value wasn't counted in fortunes or skyscrapers. It was measured in seconds, in breaths, in the courage of someone willing to act when others froze. But this moment, charged with urgency and miraculous clarity, was only the tip of the iceberg. How did a lonely billionaire at the height of his corporate empire end up in a dusty diner in Phoenix? And how had a young Bedouin immigrant, studying far from the deserts of her youth, become the one to save him? The answer lies in a story of isolation, longing, and the quiet acts that prepare ordinary people for extraordinary moments. It's a story that begins long before that tea mug shattered, long before the panic, the gasps, and the fear. What would you have done in this exact moment? I genuinely want to know. Before we continue, I just want to say I spent countless hours crafting this story for you. If you enjoy stories like this, a quick subscribe would truly mean a lot. Phoenix in the morning was a city wrapped in a haze of heat and dust. Sunlight poured across the asphalt, baking the sidewalks and casting long, sharp shadows beneath the skeletal palms lining the streets. Inside Sagebrush Corner, the diner hummed with the quiet rhythm of early customers, the hiss of the coffee machine, the scrape of chairs against linoleum, the faint tinkle of the neon sign struggling to flicker against the bright morning light. Layla Hassan moved among the tables with practiced ease, her hands steady as she poured coffee and delivered plates. To most, she was just another waitress, quiet, polite, diligent. But beneath her calm exterior was a mind alive with observation, memory, and the quiet fire of her heritage. Every gesture carried echoes of her grandmother's desert wisdom, the careful way she handled hot dishes, the precision in pouring tea, the patience in listening to customers' complaints without judgment. Her life was split between two worlds. By day, she navigated American streets, studied in nursing classes, and served strangers in a diner. By night, she returned to letters from her family in southern Jordan, tales of Bedouin life that shimmered with sand, wind, and tradition. Her grandmother's lessons were etched deep within her. The patience of the desert, the resilience of nomads, the power of a single, well-timed action. Even now, when she wiped down tables or folded napkins, she felt the invisible pulse of those lessons beneath her skin. Khalid Al-Rashid's world, by contrast, was one of high rises, boardrooms, and private jets. Yet on Fridays he sought escape. He craved something unpolished, real, a corner of humanity untouched by deals and deadlines. Sagebrush Corner, with its cracked leather booths, mismatched plates, and the faint scent of burnt toast, became that sanctuary. He always took the same seat by the window, gazing out at the sun-bleached streets, sipping mint tea, and letting his mind drift to memories of the Gulf. Though he was surrounded by wealth, Khalid carried a loneliness few understood. His success had built him empires but built walls around his heart. He rarely laughed without a purpose, rarely shared a meal without calculating its efficiency. Meetings filled his days, negotiations filled his nights, and travel left him suspended in airports and hotel rooms with the constant hum of isolation. Sagebrush Corner became a pocket of humanity he could breathe in without obligation, without pretense. On one ordinary Friday, as the diner filled with the familiar aroma of sizzling bacon and brewing coffee, Layla noticed Khalid hunched over a notebook, scribbling numbers that carried the weight of thousands of employees' livelihoods. Her heart ached for him in a subtle, almost imperceptible way. He seemed trapped in a golden cage, the shine of his success unable to mask the shadows beneath his eyes. It was during these quiet exchanges, small smiles, polite nods, and the occasional addition of mint tea to the menu, that the seeds of connection were planted. Neither fully realized it, yet both were slowly drawn to each other by invisible threads. Khalid seeking warmth he could not buy, and Layla carrying the quiet wisdom of a world that knew hardship, patience, and the power of small acts of care. Yet the ordinary world is never truly ordinary for long. One evening, a small test arrived in the form of an elderly man struggling to carry a tray of heavy plates. Layla noticed before anyone else, rushing forward, steadying the tray and offering a gentle smile. The man's hands shook. He had clearly lost strength with age. She guided him to a booth and stayed with him until he felt safe. It was a minor incident, barely noticed by the other patrons, but within her it resonated deeply. This was not her first act of care. It would not be her last. Every action, small, almost invisible, was preparation for the moment when courage would be demanded in full force. The diner became a stage for lessons in empathy, patience, and readiness. Meanwhile, Khalid's own tests came in subtler forms. A conference call gone wrong, a deal falling through, a partner betraying trust, all reminders that no amount of wealth could shield him from vulnerability. These small defeats, compounded by isolation, left him craving something intangible, human connection that money could not buy. Every Friday, as he sipped his tea and watched Layla move gracefully through the diner, he felt a fleeting sense of solace, a reminder that kindness existed outside boardrooms and contracts. As the weeks passed, their lives ran parallel, sometimes intersecting with a nod, a smile, or a quiet exchange. Layla noticed the small traces of fatigue in Khalid's posture, the subtle slump of a man carrying more than just physical weight. Khalid, in turn, saw in Layla a quiet strength, a patience forged not in luxury but in necessity, a calm born from years of observing life's harsh truths and responding with wisdom rather than panic. The first real test, however, came on a blistering Thursday afternoon. A child at a neighboring table began to choke on a piece of bread. Chaos erupted. Patrons panicked, unsure what to do. Khalid, sitting nearby, froze in shock. Layla's instincts kicked in. She rushed to the child, employing the techniques her grandmother had taught her years before. Her hands moved with precision and confidence, performing the Saifa-like maneuvers in miniature. Within moments, the child coughed, gasped, and took a deep, healthy breath. Relief washed over the diner, mingling with admiration. Khalid watched, his heart pounding, not from fear but from awe. The young waitress had acted where others hesitated. She had saved a life without hesitation, without expectation, without recognition. And in that moment, Khalid felt the first stirrings of understanding, that courage and compassion were measured not in titles, bank accounts, or influence, but in the willingness to act when others froze. Yet even this small victory carried an emotional weight. Layla, while proud, felt a pang of fear and uncertainty. Could she trust her instincts under real, high-stakes pressure? Did she have the courage to act when a life truly hung in the balance? Her interior world became a quiet storm, pride tempered with anxiety, confidence shadowed by the possibility of failure. And for Khalid, a question began to take shape in his mind. How often had he been passive when someone needed him most? How much of life had he spent frozen, staring at problems he could not, or would not solve? The ordinary world, in all its simplicity, had set the stage. Layla had honed her instincts, Khalid had felt the ache of isolation, and the diner had become a crucible for the values that would soon collide in a moment that neither could have fully anticipated. The Arizona sun hung heavy in the sky, relentless and unforgiving, turning the streets outside Sagebrush Corner into a shimmering mirage of heat. Inside, the diner felt smaller than usual, the hum of conversation muted, as though the building itself anticipated the tension that was about to unfold. Layla Hassan moved with her usual grace, but a subtle undercurrent of anxiety tugged at her chest. Something about that day felt different, a whisper of premonition she couldn't place. She had spent years cultivating patience, discipline, and awareness. Her grandmother's lessons in the desert weren't just about survival. They were about recognizing danger before it struck, understanding the rhythm of life, and trusting intuition even when reason seemed inadequate. And yet today, that intuition prickled with urgency, warning her that ordinary caution would not be enough. Meanwhile, Khalid Al-Rashid sat in his corner booth, reviewing documents on his tablet. Even in the familiar comfort of the diner, his mind was restless. The weight of decisions, missed opportunities, and personal isolation pressed down on him. He tried to focus, but every glance at Layla, her calm, unassuming presence, pulled at something he hadn't realized he missed, the quiet certainty that someone could act when others hesitated. He had seen it before with the child she had saved, and it had shaken him in ways he couldn't articulate. Life, as it often does not wait for clarity. It began subtly. The clatter of dishes dropped, the low murmur of conversation rising into tense whispers. Khalid noticed it first, a man in the next booth coughing harshly, clutching at his throat. Patrons turned their heads. Panic rippled like a sudden gust of wind. Khalid froze. For the first time, he felt a helplessness unfamiliar and terrifying. Every instinct told him to move, to do something. But every ounce of training, wealth, and experience in his life had failed to prepare him for the raw immediacy of a life-threatening moment. Layla's head snapped toward the source. Her pulse accelerated, each beat a drum of recognition. She knew that sound. She had seen it, felt it, studied it. Her hands moved instinctively, but in that instant the stakes escalated from the routine to the unimaginable. This wasn't a child or an elderly man. It was Khalid, a figure whose presence was both comforting and alien, whose life she had only glimpsed in fragments through polite greetings and weekly exchanges. The first impulse was doubt. Could she act? Could she impose herself on someone so important, someone she barely knew, and trust that her skills, ancient, desert-honed, yet foreign in this urban setting, would succeed? Every voice in her mind urged caution, hesitation. Yet another whispered, "This is your moment, you know what to do." The doctor who had arrived earlier that day, a man with authority stamped in white coats and years of study, rushed forward. He attempted the Heimlich maneuver with determination, but Khalid's breaths were quick, shallow, failing. Layla watched, frustration mingling with fear. The doctor's technique was textbook, precise, but he was panicking too, his confidence cracking under the pressure of real danger. Time ticked mercilessly. Every second was a sharp exclamation point, a reminder of life's fragility. Layla faced a decision that demanded courage beyond ordinary measure: intervene or wait. To step forward was to challenge authority, to risk embarrassment, to stake her very judgment against the collective hesitation of the room. Yet the whisper of her grandmother's wisdom was clear. When the breath is trapped, act, steady, upward, strong. Her mind raced. She imagined the desert, endless dunes under a burning sun, caravans traveling under starlight, a traveler choking on dried bread or a date, life balanced on the edge of a breath. Every night her grandmother's voice had drilled the movements into her muscle memory, into her soul. The Saifa release was not a gimmick. It was survival distilled into motion. Khalid's panic escalated. His face flushed purple, lips trembling, eyes wide and glassy. Patrons whispered, some stood paralyzed, others murmured prayers. The air in the diner felt thick, almost solid, pressing against everyone's chest. Khalid's life, so far removed from the ordinary, was about to hinge on the courage of a single young woman. Layla stepped closer, heart pounding. Doubt pressed against her like a physical weight. If she failed, he could die. And yet, if she hesitated, he would die anyway. Her grandmother's lessons crystallized into clarity, action over hesitation, knowledge over fear. She gently placed a hand on his abdomen, the other stabilizing his chest. Her motions were precise: a lift, a compression, an upward push, sharp but controlled. Every nerve in her body focused on timing, strength, and accuracy. She blocked out the gasps, the cries, the clattering dishes. Only the breath mattered, only his life. The moment stretched. Seconds became an eternity. The diner held its collective breath, as if suspended between two worlds. Khalid's body shuddered violently, his eyes glazing over, then, miraculously, a fragment of tea leaf shot from his mouth. Air rushed into his lungs, deep and trembling. His chest expanded, trembling with relief. He gasped, coughed weakly, then inhaled in a shuddering, glorious gasp that sent warmth back through his face. Tears stung his eyes, and for the first time in years he felt profoundly, unshakably alive. The diner erupted. Applause, laughter, and tears mingled in chaotic harmony. The doctor stepped back, stunned, almost reverent. Patrons cheered, some hugging, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Khalid's gaze locked on Layla. He was trembling, pale, overwhelmed with gratitude and awe. You saved my life," he managed to whisper. Layla's hands were still shaking, her heart pounding. "It was the Saifa," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. "An ancient Bedouin technique. My grandmother taught me." The weight of what had just happened settled over them. Khalid's mind raced, not just with relief but with recognition. He had seen wealth, power, and influence fail in moments of true human peril. Now, he witnessed courage, wisdom, and compassion triumph, embodied in someone who had nothing to prove, nothing to gain, and everything to risk. Both of them were changed in that instant. Khalid felt a humbling vulnerability, a new appreciation for the quiet acts of courage in the world. Layla felt the immense gravity of her lineage, her training, her instincts, and a profound sense of responsibility that would shape every choice thereafter. And yet the story did not end in relief. The transformation, the ripple effects, and the lessons about courage, compassion, and connection were only beginning. The diner had returned to its usual rhythm, but everything had changed. Plates clinked and coffee steamed, but the air carried a different weight, a quiet reverence, as though the events of the afternoon had left a permanent mark on the walls, the linoleum floor, the cracked leather booths. Sagebrush Corner had witnessed something extraordinary, yet ordinary, a reminder that heroism often comes in humble forms. Khalid Al-Rashid sat in his usual corner, hands still trembling from the near tragedy. The teacup in front of him remained untouched. Around him, patrons whispered, exchanged glances, and shook their heads in awe. But Khalid's eyes were fixed on Layla Hassan. She moved among the tables with gentle efficiency, wiping crumbs from plates, refilling coffee, tending to customers as if nothing had happened. Yet in every precise motion, Khalid saw courage, wisdom, and humanity distilled into action. He could feel it, the enormity of a life saved, not by power or influence, but by an ordinary person willing to act decisively, without hesitation in the face of fear. He reached out, placing a trembling hand on the table between them. I don't know how to thank you," he said, voice choked. "I thought I understood life, I thought I knew strength, but what you did, it changed everything." Layla paused, a faint flush on her cheeks. She had expected gratitude, perhaps admiration, but not the depth of emotion radiating from this man, this stranger who had unknowingly carried the same quiet longing for connection she had always felt. "You don't need to thank me," she said softly. "I just did what had to be done." And in that simple statement, Khalid understood something profound. True courage, true kindness, doesn't seek reward. It exists in the moment, in the decision to act when hesitation could cost a life. The ripple effects were immediate. News of the incident spread through the diner's regulars, then to social media, then local news. Layla became a quiet hero, her story celebrated not for fame or fortune, but for embodying the values often lost in the rush of modern life: intuition, courage, and humanity. Patrons returned with newfound warmth, tipping generously, leaving notes of gratitude, sharing stories of their own fears and acts of courage. The diner, once a simple refuge, became a small monument to human connection. For Khalid, the transformation was even more personal. The billionaire who had lived behind walls of success and isolation suddenly felt the pulse of the human world in ways he had long forgotten. He began to see life differently, not as a series of transactions and conquests, but as a web of fragile moments, each carrying the potential for connection, compassion, and change. He returned to Sagebrush Corner regularly, no longer merely seeking solace, but seeking a sense of belonging. Over time, Khalid and Layla's relationship evolved, grounded not in wealth or status, but in mutual respect and understanding. He supported her nursing studies not as charity, but as recognition of her dedication, her skill, and her courage. She taught him patience, listening, and the quiet wisdom of her heritage. Together, they became an example of how compassion can bridge worlds, cultures, and experiences. Years later, when Khalid reflected on that moment, he realized that the tea leaf and the choking incident were never truly about the crisis itself. They were about awakening. They were about understanding that life's true value is not measured in empires, cars, or yachts, but in courage, in action, and in the willingness to see and help others when it matters most. Layla, too, carried the lesson forward. She remembered the fear, the hesitation, and the clarity that had cut through it. She became a nurse, a teacher, a mentor, passing on the skills, wisdom, and courage of her grandmother to new generations. And every time she guided a hand, calmed a panic, or taught a frightened child how to breathe again. She remembered the day she saved a man who, in turn, had saved her understanding of what it means to truly live. The diner itself transformed too, not physically, but spiritually. Sagebrush Corner became a small hub of hope, a place where stories of courage and kindness were exchanged, a reminder that the world could change through quiet, deliberate acts. Patrons came not only for food, but for the sense of community, of witnessing everyday heroism. And for Khalid and Layla, the connection endured far beyond that fateful afternoon. They had discovered a truth older than wealth, older than technology, older than empires, that human life is sacred, fragile, and infinitely precious, and that the courage of ordinary people can illuminate even the darkest moments. Khalid's boardrooms felt different now, his meetings held with a subtle but profound awareness of the lives behind every decision. Layla's nursing work carried the same ancient wisdom she had brought from the desert, yet now it was enriched by the knowledge that courage, when acted upon, reverberates in ways no one can predict. And so, in the dusty heat of Phoenix, amidst broken plates and flickering neon lights, a billionaire and a young Bedouin woman had shown that true kindness is not measured in wealth or status, but in the courage to act, the heart to care, and the quiet wisdom to know what to do in the moment that matters most. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing so I can keep bringing you stories like this. Stories of courage, compassion, and the extraordinary power of ordinary people.